So while we meet today on a virtual platform, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this nation home. Please join me in acknowledging the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can each, in our own way, work towards reconciliation and collaboration. Thank you. Rose, if I could get the next slide, please. Wonderful. So before we begin, I'll go over some really quick housekeeping items. You'll notice that your microphones and cameras are disabled. It is not because I don't want to see your lovely faces. It is because I love to steal the spotlight. Not actually, it is just to avoid any distractions or background noise that might leak in from anyone that is in our webinar today. You'll see though that there is the chat feature enabled, so feel free to interact with myself, with other participants, and with our lovely co-hosts using the chat feature, which is shown by the speech bubble icon. As well, if you have any burning questions, feel free to pop those into the Q&A box, which you'll see right there alongside the chat box. I will mention as well that we are recording today's session, so just if you want to be mindful of that, that would be fantastic, and we will be posting this in our upcoming online resource library. And finally, one more thing that I did want to mention in terms of webinar features is the poll feature. So I will be administering 1 or 2 polls just to get an idea of where everyone's at in terms of their knowledge of eating well on a budget. So Rose, if you wouldn't mind switching slides and putting up that first poll for us, that would be fantastic. All right, so Rose has initiated the first poll. If you wouldn't mind answering the question before attending this event, how familiar are you with best practices on eating well on a budget? Okay, so I see about half of our participants have responded. All right, we are just about there. I'm seeing about 9 or 10 more people that just need to get those responses in. All right, it looks like we are about capping there. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for responding to that poll. And Rose, if I could get the next slide, please. Okay, so before I jump into the content here, I know you're all really excited to learn about eating well on a budget. I just wanted to briefly introduce Second Harvest for those of you in the room who may not be familiar with us. We are Canada's largest food rescue organization and experts in perishable food recovery. We have a dual mission of no waste, no hunger, and it's our commitment to the planet that is both environmental and community focused. In our last 36 years, we've been rescuing unsold surplus food from across the supply chain and redirecting that food to social services agencies to better help them serve their communities through food programs. Next slide, please. So I've posted a little bit of an agenda there to give you a brief overview of what we'll be doing today. So we'll be talking about 6 strategies to keep food costs low. We'll be doing some fun activities to put these ideas into practice. I'll be providing you some key nutrition tips along the way. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you will be leaving knowing that eating well on a budget is indeed achievable, and knowing that by taking the time to properly plan and with a little bit of practice, you too can become an expert on eating well on a budget. Next slide, please. Okay, so I know that lately with webinars, we've all loved to engage in passive learning, which is a lot of sitting there and letting me give you all the information, but no, I am going to make you work for the information. We're gonna play a little bit of a game called The Price is Right. You may be familiar with it. When I was growing up, it was Bob Barker that hosted it. I think more recently it's Drew Carey. Today you will get neither of those people. You will be getting Krish Dayalan, but I am happy to be your host. So what I'll be doing is I'll be posting some photos of different food items that you can get as part of takeout menus at different restaurants, along with an idea of how much those tend to cost. What you need to tell me is how much you think it would cost to make the equivalent serving at home by buying ingredients. So Rose, if you just want to pull up the first example there, we've got a takeout chicken burrito. So I'd love if you could pop in the chat what you think it would cost to make that same burrito at home. So it's about $11 if you go to a restaurant like Chipotle or something along those lines. Wonderful. I'm seeing $3, I'm seeing $4, I'm seeing $6. I feel like an auctioneer here. All right, we're getting responses all over the board here. I think most of you are leaning towards $3, $4, $5. Rose, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the answer here. All right, so it costs $4.40 to make this burrito at home. So I think a lot of you had hit the nail on the head, which is great. I think a lot of us know that it can cost a lot less to make the food at home as opposed to buying it at a restaurant. Let's go ahead with the next example. Okay, so a bean salad, go ahead and guess. It's $4.50. Let's say you were working at the office, you didn't actually pack a lunch that day. So you thought, oh, I'm gonna stop by the local Loblaws and I will pick something up from the deli counter. And in a parallel universe, let's say that you had done the right thing and you decided to meal prep and you came with a bean salad made at home. So I'm seeing a lot of $1, $2, $3, $1.50. Okay, I think a lot of them are floating around $2 here. All right, Rose, do you mind showing us the answer here? So it's $4.50 for the recipe, which is about the same as the cost of buying the bean salad in the store. But you need to keep in mind that in making the recipe, you're creating several servings. So Rose, if you could hit it one more time, it's about $1.50 per serving to make it at home and have one serving. So you're using about a third of the cost, if my math is correct, to make the same bean salad and bring that with you to work. And the nice thing about making it homemade is that you're able to customize it according to, what kinds of beans you like and what kinds of dressing you like and so on. All right, one more, let's go, Rose. All right, canned chili, it's about $2 per can. How much do you think it'll take to make the same serving of chili at home? I used to love chunky chili growing up. That was always one of the things that was in the pantry when my parents were away. It was either chunky chili or it was pizza pops, or on a lucky day, I was able to actually get money to order out a pizza. All right, I'm seeing things all over the place. $1, $2, $4. Some people are giving me the cost for a dozen, yeah. Yeah, depending on the cut of beef, that is a really good point. $12 for the whole batch and $2 per serving, great. Yeah, thinking about those portion sizes. Rose, why don't you go ahead and show us what the answer is? So we're having about $9 for recipe and for serving, $1.50. So I think a lot of you hit the nail on the head there. So you're not saving so much. You're saving about 50 cents per serving in using a homemade chili versus the can. But it's important to also keep in mind that you're able to do more customization with the chili, right? You can really load that up with vegetables. You can reduce the amount of salt. You can use more spices that you like to taste. It's a really good way to make a chili that is unique to you and your family's tastes. So let's go ahead to the next slide here. Okay, so this image that I'm showing you is straight out of a project management textbook. And I'm a very kind of systematic thinker. So when I'm thinking about planning recipes, I think of it as a project. when you are thinking about a project and what your end product is going to be, you're always thinking about it in terms of three factors. One is time. So how quickly or how slowly are you going to get this product made? The other one is cost. Now, in terms of cost, I'll go over exactly what cost means, but what resources will be required in order to make that final product happen? And finally, quality or scope. So what features will this final product have? So in this case, we're probably talking about nutritional quality. But what else can you think of, and maybe you can tell me this in the chat, that are encapsulated under cost? So we're not always just thinking about money when you're thinking about cost. What else could that be? Health costs, time costs, yeah, those are two great ones. Electricity, exactly, so energy. I'm seeing a lot of time and health, travel time. So not only the travel time in terms of time, but you could also be thinking about gas miles or bus fare and things like that. Labor is a really good one. Skills, exactly, that's a great one. I didn't think about that one. Mental capacity. Ooh, space in the fridge cost is a great one. Your capacity to store stuff. All right, so I'm seeing some great examples of costs there. And Rose, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the costs that are in a list there. Wonderful. So when we're usually thinking about cost, we're thinking about money, but you also need to think about things in terms of the amount of labor that you're putting into something, or the equipment that you need to create a meal, or how much you'll enjoy that meal once it's made. I think I like to fall back on the example of how many spoons you have. So there's this theory that everyone starts the day with a certain number of spoons, and with each activity that you do throughout the day, it's costing you a certain amount of spoons. So one day, if you've used a lot of spoons on, let's say, doing a presentation on eating well on a budget, you may not have as many spoons available for creating an intricate meal at the end of the day. So it's always good to kind of keep in mind the costs that are involved that are not monetary. All this to say that eating well on a budget is a balancing act, right? It's choosing which foods to eat and when, according to your mood, according to your schedule, and according to your individual dietary needs. So let's keep on moving here. So before I go into my 6 strategies on how to keep my food budget low, I'd love to know a little bit about yours. So what do you do at home or in your organization to help keep budgets low in terms of food? Buying in season, buying in bulk, looking for sales, alternate proteins, price matching. Wow, I don't even need to give this webinar at this point. You guys are hitting all the ones that I was going to mention. Dry beans and pulses, use up everything. That's a great one. Find new ways to use things, reduce the amount of food waste, planning, discounted items. One-pot meals is a great one. I love one-pot meals. I can always freeze things after I've created a big batch, and then I don't have to worry about cooking for the next little while. Meal sharing, I love that idea of the social aspects of cooking. Maybe not so much during COVID, but cross-utilizing items is a great one. All right, great. Let's go on to my first tip here in terms of key strategies. So we've got planning what you can. I think someone had mentioned planning. That's great. Looking out for sales and discounts, buying in bulk. I think one of the first ones that we saw there was buying in season. I don't think anyone mentioned considering canned or frozen items, and I'll go into a little bit more details about that. And I think a lot of people had mentioned using alternate proteins. So I'm happy to dig into that as well. So let's go more into our first one on planning what you can. Okay, so in terms of planning what you can, there are quite a few different things that you can choose to plan about. And in terms of planning, what this allows you to do is it allows you to make more intentional decisions now in order to save money in the long run. So the first thing that you can determine in your planning is which grocery store you're going to go to, because not all grocery stores are the same. right? One might be closer, whereas another one might be less expensive. One might have online ordering, which in these days of COVID, online ordering makes things a lot easier when you don't want to go into the store. You can compare price points, you can compare quality. Another really important thing to consider is culturally appropriate foods. Is the grocery store that you're going to able to stock all of the items that you might need in terms of specific brands, specific spices, specific ingredients? I grew up eating a lot of Sri Lankan cuisine. So a lot of the stuff that we wanted in the grocery store, we had to go to a special Tamil supermarket. So those are all good things to consider in terms of choosing your grocery store. The other thing that you might want to consider is planning your meals. So I know we all have heard about this concept of meal planning, and it's not something that's absolutely necessary, but it's something that certainly helps. Why does it help? It helps because you're able to A, use ingredients across multiple recipes, B, you're able to prepare meals in bulk, and C, you're able to, most importantly, take your busy schedule into account. So falling back on that spoon theory that I mentioned, it's important to think about, if you have a full day of meetings one day, maybe you don't have time to go out and buy lunch. You might want to prepare something the evening before and pack it up to bring with you to work the next day. These days, I know a lot of us are working from home, so that's less of an issue, but same concept applies, right? If you have something ready that you can just throw in the oven quickly, you don't have to go through the time of assembling or prepping ingredients to put your lunch together. And finally, planning out your grocery lists. I think this is really important because this is something that I fall victim to all the time. And making a list really helps you in terms of buying only what you need. My pro tip is not to shop hungry. I do this all the time where I'll go into a store, I'll be somewhat hungry, I'll be a little bit cranky or hangry as they call it because I need a snack to get my blood sugar up. So I'll immediately reach for something that'll give me instant gratification, whether it's a bag of chips or a pack of chocolates or I love peppermint patties, for example. So try not to shop hungry, try to stick to your list, but I'll tell you what the exception is as we move through the presentation. All of that being said, though, I want you to remember that we are only human. So think about things intuitively, right? You're always feeding a need, whether that be something physical, whether that be something mental, or whether that be something emotional. Listen to your body and respond appropriately in terms of the way that you're eating. It's not about what you're eating every single time. It's about your overall eating pattern. But intuitive eating is a whole nother topic on itself, and maybe we'll do a webinar on that one day. So let's move on to the next tip. Okay, looking for sales and discounts. This one's a bit of a doozy, right? Obviously, if you want to save money on groceries, you want to be looking for sales and discounts, but there's a few different ways that you can do that. One is price matching. Some people like to go old school. They like to get the flyers in the mail and cut out coupons. Some stores will do price matching, which is great. So you bring in the flyer from another store and you tell them, hey, listen, what's to stop me from going to your competitor and getting this pack of bananas when they're selling it for $1 cheaper. So you can use price matching in that way. Flip app is a really good opportunity for price matching. It'll compare the same product across several different stores, and it really takes the legwork out of doing price matching. Another good option is looking at student and senior discounts. If you are a student or if you are over, I think most stores do 65 or 60 years old, you are usually able to get a discount on a specific day of the week. I think when I was a student back in the Stone Age, Metro did a 15% discount for students on Wednesdays or something like that. Another really good option is looking at no-name brands, right? With some items, yes, you definitely want to go with the brand name version because you want higher quality ingredients. But in most cases, the no-name option is almost always cheaper and of a similar quality. And finally, thinking about imperfect produce. I think it was at Loblaws that I saw recently that they're doing a full bag of imperfect apples. So it's discounted, and sometimes it'll be up to 50%. You will often see at the grocery store that they have a shelf that says, use by this evening or enjoy by tonight. And that produce will be 50% off. So that I always love to keep in mind when I'm going grocery shopping, especially for things like meats. I've often gone to the store and I've gotten like a nice strip loin for $6 or $7, which is fantastic. All right, let's go on to our next tip here. So buying in bulk is something that I would recommend to everyone, especially if you have the storage space. And this is specific to items that have a longer shelf life. You don't necessarily always want to buy in bulk when it is something that is perishable, because you want to be mindful that you're not buying more than what you need and then it goes bad at the back of the fridge. I accidentally do this sometimes with spinach. We're all guilty of it. I think with spinach, a really good thing is just to freeze it as soon as you see it starting to not look so hot. But buying in bulk is something that you can certainly do with things like cans, oats, things along those lines, and always something to keep in mind. Some stores do this really great thing where they will show you the dollars per 100 grams. So the example that I'm showing you up there is looking at oats. You often will see those pre-packaged oats. So you are able to pay $3.27 for about a packet, for 10 packets of those. And it comes out to about just over $1 per 100 grams of oats. On the other hand, you can go ahead and buy the 2¼ kilograms. So it's about 2,000 grams of oats. And it comes out to $5.97. Or 26 cents per 100 grams of oats, which is a considerable cost saving. Recognizing that with the packets of oats, you may be saving on some of the labor costs of dividing some of the things out, the portions out in terms of oats. So that's definitely something that is really good to do because you're spending more money now, but you're saving more money later. So my question to you is, can you do this with perishable goods? I know that I said that you probably shouldn't buy in bulk with perishable goods, but can you think of any strategies for buying in bulk and making sure that all of that, those perishable items can still be put to use? Go ahead and let me know in the chat. Freezing and canning, amazing. That's a great strategy. Especially if you have like a chest freezer or something like that. I love to do this with like bananas so that I can cut them up, freeze them, make banana bread out of them, or I can throw them in a smoothie. Anything else? Diana, sharing, that's fantastic. Yes, if you have roommates, if you have neighbors, if you have family that lives close by, share. Sometimes you can buy those huge things of onions or potatoes or carrots, and there is no way that I'm going to go through those for one person by the end of, sometimes those will last 2 or 3 weeks. But if you have people to share it with, you can split the cost and still take advantage of that per 100 gram number. All right, let's go on to our next tip here. Buying in season. So this is something that I love to do. One thing that I'm really looking forward to for spring is strawberries and rhubarb so that I can make pie. Does anyone have anything that they're looking forward to for spring in terms of seasonal vegetables or fruits? Oh yes, and growing. I think we're just getting into the growing season. Kumquats, peas, berries. Oh, I love berries in the summer, and there's so many things you can do with them. Asparagus, summer peaches, definitely. I love a grilled peach on a salad. Mwah. Wild leek, that's fantastic. Someone is mentioning that beets are a fall product in Ontario, and you know what? I think you're right. Watermelon, exactly, yeah. So buying in season is fantastic because you'll often see these items on sale. They'll be super fresh. It's a good opportunity to support local and reduce food miles. And one thing that I'll mention too is there's a sense of excitement that comes with seasonal produce, right? think about pumpkins or apples in the fall, right? We're all getting our pumpkin spice and making pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving and carving out pumpkins for Halloween. And apples, we love to go apple picking at the orchards and making nice apple pies or candied apples at Halloween. On the other hand, in the summer, we love making corn on the cob and serving watermelon at our kids' soccer games and things like that. So I think it's important to also think about that social aspect and that cultural aspect around food and seasonal eating. It just really allows you to kind of enjoy your food more and get more engaged with your food. All right, let's head on to our next tip here. Okay, considering canned and frozen items. So quick pop quiz here. Are canned and frozen items more nutritious, less nutritious, or the same amount of nutrients compared to fresh? I'm seeing same, I'm seeing same. Everyone is saying same. Wonderful. So actually you are 100% right. Frozen and, oh, you know what? Susie has a good point. Canned has more salt, and I will get into that. Canned and frozen items, fruits and vegetables specifically, are preserved at their peak ripeness. So that means that they're at their peak level of nutrients. They are preserved at a point where they aren't starting to go bad in any way. So they are no worse and no better than eating something that's fresh. But you do have the added benefit of extended shelf life. And you have the ability to also cut and freeze stuff that you get fresh as well. So it's totally fine to pick some stuff up, chop it up to use later and throw it in the freezer. I think it was Susie that had a great point around salt. Canned items can often be high in sodium. So always try to look for the variety of cans that are low in sodium, or better yet, no salt added, just to make sure that you are not loading yourself full of sodium. Joy, you have a great point there that sodium contents are on the label. So if you look at the nutrition facts table on the back, look up for sodium and try to look for one that says 0 milligrams. Oftentimes though, on the front of package labeling, it'll say no salt added at some point. All right, so let's move into our next and I think final tip. All right, plant-based proteins. I think a number of you had said this at the very beginning when I'd asked you for some of your own strategies in terms of saving money on meals. So I've shown you some examples there. Dried lentils or beans or split peas are really good options. Canned beans or lentils, I love to always keep on hand. Nuts and seeds are great for kind of just sprinkling on stuff and adding a little bit of crunch, especially for nut butters and seed butters. It's a really good way to add some flavor in a really easy and quick way. A couple things that I'll mention here is oftentimes the cheapest variety of these are the dried versions. So if you get a pack of dried lentils, it'll be a lot more, not a lot more, but to a level more inexpensive than a canned variety. And you can also kind of purchase more and store them in a more space-effective way. However, with canned items, you are paying for the convenience of being able to simply drain and rinse. So you don't have to soak them overnight. You don't need to worry about cooking them. You can just pour it out of the can, give it a rinse, and it is good to go. Again, with these canned items, always go for the no sodium variety if possible. With nuts and seeds, they are a great option because they are often full of healthy fats. They can add fiber to your diet. I will mention always to look out for varieties that are not roasted in hydrogenated oil, that don't have added salt or sugar, especially with peanut butters. So that's something that is really good to keep in mind. Next slide, please. Wonderful. So you know what? I think this is a really good strategy, especially for people that don't particularly like plant-based proteins or people that need some kind of animal-based protein in all of their meals is to mix plant-based proteins with animal-based proteins. That way you're able to add some added nutrients in terms of fibers. You're able to reduce the amount of saturated fat in your diet. And I'll give you a quick example of something that I did this weekend, which was, Saturday here in Toronto, the weather was lovely. I think it got up to like 14 degrees or something like that. It was like spring has finally sprung. So we decided to kick up the barbecue, which is always like a nice kind of welcoming spring activity in the family. We were able to grill up some burgers. But of course, we were a little bit ambitious and we made way too many burgers for 4 people. And what we ended up doing was putting some of those burgers in the fridge and trying to find out a way to make use of them. So I had the idea of turning these burgers into a shepherd's pie, right? I just threw them into the food processor, gave them a quick pulse to grind them down into a ground beef-like consistency. And because we didn't have quite enough burgers for a full shepherd's pie, I emptied out a can of lentils and mixed it up with the ground beef. So that's a really good strategy for getting in some additional protein, and it doesn't have to be animal-based protein. Lentils are a great source of protein, they're a great source of fiber, and it costs us a very insignificant fraction of the cost of ground beef. Julie has a great idea there in terms of freezing the patties. Yes, that's a great idea. You can freeze them and you can reheat them at a later date. I think freezer ideas can often last, freezer meats, once they're cooked, can often last for about 6 months or so once they're frozen. So we'll move on to our next slide here. Perfect. So I think most of you are familiar with the new Canada's Food Guide, or at least you've seen it in some respect. The reason why I want to show this here is just to talk about the proportions. So when you are planning a healthy meal, or a balanced meal, I should call it, you want to think about having half a plate of vegetables, a quarter of a plate of proteins, and a quarter of a plate of whole grains. Now, this can be hard to do. So how can we ensure that we do this almost each and every time? Next slide, please. Okay, so I've included 4 quick tips here in terms of making sure that each and every time you're able to have a balanced meal. One is eating a variety of colors. I usually like to include at least 2 vegetables or 2 fruits of different colors and mix it up each time. A really easy way to be able to mix it up is to be able to go out and buy items on sale, right? About 2 or 3 weeks ago, for the first time ever, I bought dragon fruit. It's not something that I'm familiar with at all, but I saw that it was on sale and I was like, oh, this is something that I'd like to try. Let me look up some quick recipes for this. So I was able to make smoothies, I was able to make bowls, I was able to put it on oats. I didn't really love it on oats, but I did love it in a bowl or in a smoothie. So I would highly recommend it. But buying things on sale are a great way of looking at new foods that you may not have tried before, and expanding your palate and exposing yourself to nutrients and micronutrients that you might not usually be exposing yourself to. Number 2 is maximizing your fiber and protein. Again, a good way to do this is by using more plant-based proteins, using more non-starchy vegetables, using more whole grains. Those are all great sources of fiber. And of course, dairy is also a great source of protein as well. Number 3 is paying attention to sodium. I've already given you one great tip for that, and that is paying attention to the nutrition facts table. Right? Even if you are buying a frozen dinner, those can be very high in sodium, but a good idea might be to compare 2 varieties of a frozen meal and pick the one that's slightly less in sodium. Sometimes it's okay to have a frozen dinner and you want to make the healthier choice of the 2. And number 4, most importantly, is to enjoy your meals. Everyone's dietary needs and food preferences are up to them. They're individual. Everyone is different. Food should not be a chore. You need to find what you like about your food and lean into that. You know, some families live and breathe by the Instant Pot. Some families love to do weekly meal prep, and that works for them. Some families cook every single night. So find what works for you and your household and do that. The best diet is one that you can stick to. Next slide, please. Okay, so what can this look like in terms of that nicely proportioned meal? Take a look at this recipe here in terms of red lentil dal on rice. So there's a picture there and that kind of gives you a visual of what that might look like. Let's pretend that the rice is sitting underneath that red lentil dal there. Does this look like the Canada's Food Guide? Does this look like that perfectly nice portion of half a plate of vegetables with 1/4 of it being proteins and 1/4 of it being grains? Yes or no? Okay, I'm seeing a yes. Yes. Some people are saying no. All right, wonderful. So I'm seeing a bit of a split decision here. And I think Joy has the right idea here. It doesn't look the same, right? Like when you're looking at that plate, you're not seeing that exactly half the plate is fruits and vegetables, exactly 1/4 is proteins, and exactly 1/4 is whole grains. But when you look at the ingredients list a little bit closer, you can see that the components in terms of the ingredients that are put into the recipe are a little bit more balanced, right? You have a couple cups, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 cups of vegetables and fruits in there. You have, a cup and a half of lentils. The rice is not included in there, but for example's sake, let's say that it was 1/4 of the proportion as well. So all this to say that it doesn't necessarily need to look like the Canada's Food Guide, but what you need to keep into account is the proportions of the vegetables and fruits that you are using. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's put everything that we've learned today into practice. I am showing you 3 staple items here, and what I'm going to ask, I'm going to go one item at a time. What are some healthy additions that you can use to balance each of these staple foods? So consider the 6 strategies that I've taught you. Consider the plate model in terms of the Canada's Food Guide, and consider what flavors that you like and what kinds of foods you like to eat. Think about ways that you might want to reduce the cost of these meals and what might be great to help make these meals balanced. So Rose, if you don't mind going to the next slide, we'll start with oats. Okay, so let me know in the chat there what you might add to oats to make it a balanced meal. So I'm seeing frozen berries. Yep, that's great in terms of fruits and vegetables. Nuts are a great example in terms of protein. Yogurt is a great breakfast protein. I am a huge fan of yogurt and I like to do overnight oats with yogurt. Oats with frozen fruit, that's on sale, perfect. Cheese, yeah, that's a really good one. I love doing savory oats, actually. I discovered that more recently with a poached egg. Oats and poached egg can be a fantastic meal. Pancakes, that's a great example. You may not think about oats in terms of an ingredient in pancakes, but it can certainly help. All right, Rose, let's show what examples that we've come up with here. Perfect. Frozen fruits, cinnamon, sunflower seeds. I think a lot of you gave that example already. Mashed banana and peanut butter oat cookies. That's more of a breakfast dessert, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, right? Mashed banana is a fruit or vegetable. Peanut butter gives you a little bit of protein in there. Oats also give you a little bit of protein and it's a whole grain. So that's a really good example. How about potatoes? How might you put together potatoes in a way that is balanced and in a way that might meet your food budget? Go ahead and give me some examples in the chat. Loaded potatoes with chili. I love chili, or I love loaded potatoes or twice baked potatoes. Shepherd's pie, that's a great example. I love making shepherd's pie. It's a nice one pot meal that you can make and you can store it really easily. Potatoes under roast chicken, sounds delicious. Ooh, gnocchi. It's definitely a little bit more of an involved dish to make, but well worth it. Home fries and eggs, a perfect breakfast meal at any occasion. And I might even just throw a side salad in there just to add some more vegetables. Personally, I consider proteins to be more of a grain because it's a starchy vegetable. So I'd like to add a green or some kind along with that. All right, wonderful. Now I won't go into the, you know what, let's show up the examples that we had there for potatoes. Great, so I think a lot of you had said baked potatoes, that's fantastic. I gave the example of chickpeas and diced tomatoes, so kind of like a chana. Sweet potato and lentil soup is a really great example. I think potatoes are fantastic in a soup. I love roasting a bunch of vegetables and then just blending them with some coconut milk. And that makes a really great soup that stores really well. Perfect. Now I want to make sure that we have time for questions at the end. So I'm going to skip over rice, but I will show you a couple of examples there. Rose, if you don't mind pulling those up. Great. So lentil curry with tomato paste, using lots of imperfect produce. That's great. Tofu stir fry. I love tofu. You can really do tofu in several different ways. I love to crisp it up on the pan first and then throw it in the oven. All right, let's keep moving here. And those are just some ideas of how much that would cost in terms of doing each of those things. Next slide, please. Perfect. So just as a quick summary here in terms of what we've learned today, planning and cooking from home can really help reduce food costs. You've learned 6 strategies to keep food costs low in terms of looking for sales and discounts, planning ahead, looking for plant-based proteins and things along those lines. We learned about choosing foods that are low in sodium and high in fiber and protein in order to help us meet the Canada's Food Guide. And we learned that cooking more can help you improve food skills, reduce costs, and most of all, help you enjoy meals. Before we go into questions here, I do want to do a bit of a poll. So Rose, if you don't mind going to the next slide and popping that poll up for us. Wonderful. So if everyone wouldn't mind quickly filling out that poll for me. Wonderful. I'm seeing about 2/3 of the people have responded. And I'll give about 10 more seconds. All right, if we can just get those last responses in there, and then we'll go ahead and we'll close the poll. Fantastic. All right, and before I go into questions and answers, I just wanted to highlight a couple of the upcoming workshops that we have in our speaker series. I will be running one on eating sustainably for the planet next week on Tuesday, so you can feel free to register for that on Eventbrite. Emily, thank you so much for linking that in the chat there. Please feel free to register for learning about how your diet can also be one that is more green. As well, we will be running our 2-day Food Defenders series at the end of April, which I am so excited about. We have invited Bob Bloomer, our TV chef, as well as 2 empowered BIPOC community members who will be sharing some of their learnings as well in terms of how to be a food defender. So please keep an eye out for that. Please register in advance on Eventbrite, and we hope to see you there. And finally, I will open up the floor to any questions that anyone might have. I'm seeing a question there in terms of what is a food defender? That is a great question. A food defender is someone who is taking a pledge to be able to eat in a way that reduces their food waste. And being able to eat in a way that is sustainable for future generations. Lisa, I'm seeing a great question from Lisa on plant-based proteins. Is plant-based protein better than animal protein, or is it just a matter of choice? That is a really great question, and it is a kind of a balancing act, right? With plant-based proteins, you are getting more fiber and you are getting less saturated fat, but you are also getting less protein in those plant-based proteins. With animal-based proteins, you are getting a higher concentration of proteins, but you are also getting more saturated fats along with that. At the same time, you are also getting more iron with saturated fats. So I think for, especially for women of childbearing age, you may want to include some level of animal-based protein just to be able to keep up on on your iron stores. I am seeing a question in the, as well in terms of vitamin C, how much is left after cooking? That is a really good question. Vitamin C doesn't degrade too much in terms of cooking, especially if you're eating something raw. The problem with vitamin C is that it is water soluble. So a lot of the times if you are boiling vegetables or boiling fruits, and then you're dumping that water out, a lot of the vitamin C, as well as other water soluble vitamins and minerals, can be leaching out into that water, and you're losing all of that great nutrients that would have been otherwise captured in the ingredients. So always try to save your broth and use it in some way, especially with boiled vegetables, or better yet, steam them. Can you send the recording of this session on email? We will not be sending the recording via email, but we will be posting it in our online resource library and on YouTube. So you can feel free to look out for that on our YouTube account and our upcoming online resource library that we are hoping to launch at the end of April. Anyway, you'll be able to have a copy of this outline. Yes, indeed, we will be posting the slides as well on our online resource library, so you'll be able to access it that way. Josephine, glad you mentioned iron. Anemic people have less energy, especially when pregnant, you need extra iron. Yes, really great point, and glad I was able to hit that point today. Heard a few years ago about hydrogenated oils being prohibited in Canada. Any info or updates on that? We do know that trans fats are banned in Canada, and you will see that a lot of margarine and I think butters as well are starting to work towards, olive oil based margarines or omega-3 based margarines. So take a look out for some of those alternatives as well. That might be good options for you instead of hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated options. Our YouTube account is just Second Harvest. I unfortunately don't know the YouTube link right off the top of my head, but if you look at Second Harvest on YouTube, that will, oh, there we go. Thank you so much, Emily, for that, that quick pull up of the link there. Do you have workshops for other agencies? We do run workshops on an ongoing basis. If you'd like to request a workshop specifically for your agency or for your organization, definitely feel free to reach out to myself or to Rose, and we would be more than happy to open up that conversation with you offline. Speaking of butter, have you heard of the hard butter issue? Yes, I have. For anyone that is not familiar with that, there is controversy at the moment around whether or not butter is being cut with palm oil. I don't have a statement on that controversy at the moment because I think a lot of it is still under investigation, but I encourage you to keep tabs on what is happening in terms of that discussion. Compare your labels. The high-priced margarines with hydrogenated fats claims cost more as no-name versions with the same nutrition profiles. That's a really good point. Yes, no-name brands tend to be of lower cost than brand name varieties and tend to be more or less the same quality. Yes, we are coming into foraging season for a variety of different things. That's something that I personally would love to learn more about, especially things like mushrooms and mushroom hunting. Do you plan a different meal for each day of the week? I find it can be overwhelming to then buy ingredients for lots of different recipes, but then get bored if I just make one meal in bulk. Any tips? That's a great question, Francesca. What I do is I will plan several meals, and I will try my best to use that meal over let's say 2 days of the week. And the rest of that, what I'll do is I will freeze it. So apologies, I'm just getting a notification that my laptop is dying here and I thought I had it charged up. Yeah, so in terms of meal planning through the week, I encourage you to, especially if you have a busy day the next day, stretch your dinner out into lunch for the next day and try to freeze things as much as you can, especially for things like casseroles or soups or chilies. It's really easy to pop in the freezer and reheat on a night where you don't feel like cooking. That way you don't necessarily feel like you're eating the same exact thing every single day through the week. So it's a good way to still prepare in bulk without eating the same foods on repeat. Does that make sense? All right, I'm seeing some really great suggestions here around chickweed that I'm not too familiar with. Are there professionals that can help persons with disabilities and meal plans, for instance, creating meal plans? Certainly, I would recommend that you go to the Dietitians of Canada website, dietitians.ca, and you'll see an option there that says find a dietitian. So I believe you can specialize, you can look at different specialties that different dietitians have, and different dietitians will certainly be able to have their profiles up there so you can reach out to whichever dietitian in your locale you think might best be able to meet your needs. Jan, that's a great point. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Proteins that are on sale to use by tonight. Can you freeze them or do they need to be used that day? Yes, indeed, you can freeze them and you should freeze them. Once they are frozen, you have just extended the shelf life of that item by up to 6 months if you have stored it safely. So that is a really great thing to keep in mind when you're looking at those 50% off use by tonight or enjoy by tonight items, is you don't necessarily have to use it that night. It's great if you do, but a lot of the time you can do different things to be able to extend the life of that item. Thank you so much, Sam. That is such a great compliment. All right, I will leave the floor open. We have about 5 minutes here if anyone else has any additional questions. And if not, you can feel free to email me at krisht, that's KRISHT, at secondharvest.ca. I'll be happy to answer any additional questions offline. I mean, if I have the capacity to the best of my ability. Wonderful. So I'm not seeing any further questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. We will be sending up a follow-up email to everyone who attended probably in the next week with a quick summary. We'll send you those 6 strategies on a little sheet that you can post on your refrigerator and some additional resources that you'll be able to consult in terms of eating well on a budget going forward. Thank you so much once again, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Bye now.